My name is Joe. I'm a heroin addict. Bear with me. I just drove 5 hours from Seattle, so I had everything planned, what I was going to say, and that kind of just went out the fucking window. I guess I'll start from the beginning. I got parents, mom and dad, two sisters, a brother, and lived a pretty violent childhood. My dad's 6'7" and 380, huge fucking man, and he was very, very physically abusive. I would say probably, I think we figured it out. It was like 3 or 4 times a year I was in the hospital because he would put me in the hospital. And my sisters, they're special ed, so I got one older sister, 2 years older, and one year younger, and then I got a brother that's 5 years older than me, and it's really important that I share this part because it kind of lets you know where I was at. Was that so my dad abused me, my brother could beat me up, my sisters could put their hands on me, and if I raised a hand to them, of course, I'd get beat again. So I was pretty much beat down my whole life, and then so therefore when I started going to school and stuff like that, and we were super poor. So, kids made fun of me and stuff, and I would never fight back. I didn't know how to fight back, I would just take it, they would spit on me, beat me up. I would never try to fight back ever, and we moved to Woodburn when I was 10, and I thought, okay, fresh break, and no, it didn't happen. It started from day one, I was getting picked on a lot, really, really bad. There was a guy that lived 4 doors down that he taught Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So when I was 11, I said, man, I really want to do this, So I started practicing martial arts, and I did for about 3 years. I would do it probably, 45 minutes to an hour and a half a night, on an average. And then when I was 14, I had an altercation where I actually had confidence enough to, it wasn't like I was forced to, I had to fight back. And I walked away a winner, and I was like, fucking this shit. So I started studying about 3 or 4 hours a night. I was like, this is never going to happen to me again. And I recall when I was about 11, I had an uncle that got out of the penitentiary, and he was a bad dude. And I thought to myself, I want to go to the penitentiary when I get older, And that's pretty fucked up, 11-year-old wanting to go to the pen. That's how bad my fucking childhood was, It was like I wanted to go to the pen when I got older. And that happened. So I wasn't supposed to use it for the bad, but that's what I did. Is I became the person that I despised, which was my father. And I would physically abuse people, and I would intimidate them, and I would do that. And it was a way of survival for me at first, and then it became a way of life, and it became a major character defect. But I always knew that there was something wrong, because like when I would hurt somebody, I always wondered, did those kids that used to do that to me, when they hurt me, did they ever go home and have remorse and feel sorry for the dude, or like that kind of stuff? Because that's what I would do, is I would feel sorry for people that I hurt, and so I knew that there was this little conflict inside me, and that went through my whole life, as through crime and everything. So anyway, I graduated high school, ended up going to the pen before I was 18, went to OCI before I was 18, was in and out several times. Drugs were a part of my life when I was 8 years old, going to Richmond School in 1973, I used to get $3 for an allowance, and it was allowance from the neighbor lady, because my family didn't have any money. But for doing chores and stuff like that around our house, I'd give my brother the $3, and he would pitch it in with his money, and we'd buy a 4-finger lid of weed, and of the CD commercial shit. Anyway, he'd roll up and he'd roll me up 15 joints. I'd sell them for 50 cents a piece, so that way I had a few bucks and I had 2 joints, at 8 years old, I mean, this was cool, 3rd grade. And I was thinking, hey, that's a way. So, drugs became a way of my escaping, because I knew I was going to get beat no matter what, I tried running away, that didn't work, because I got it really bad, and so that kind of convinced me, don't try fucking running away. So drugs became a big part of my life. Well, when I was about 14, when the first altercation I got into, and then probably within 3 months, I was in probably 10 altercations. And so people kind of got the word got out that that I was somewhat cool, I guess, or whatever, because people didn't pick on me. They invited me to parties and shit like that. Well, that was the first time I shot dope. I was almost 14, and I shot heroin. My buddy's brother shot me up, and I was like, fuck, this shit's good, So I remember that what I would do is I would do a little bit before football practice or before football game, because then I could, I just made me feel a lot better, and I was only doing just a small amount. But I would do that, and then of course that escalated into a lot of other drugs, crank and coke and everything else, and I was drinking a lot through high school. And of course, drugs, led to crime, and crime led me into to the joint several times. I got really bad in my addiction, like it was really, really bad, and I couldn't find a job that would pay me a couple of $100 a day, to pay for my addiction, and then, let me be fucking loaded too, So, I blame society for that shit, It's like, that's why I had to do robberies, because nobody would hire me. So I ended up, it's like, I used to think it was a claim to fame, but now it's kind of, it's not so cool. But I was one of the pizza parlor bandits. There was 4 of us that robbed Pietro's and Pizza Hut and 3 other pizza parlors. And I ended up doing a lengthy stay in the penitentiary for that. And a very long stay. And that didn't keep me from doing drugs, man, because I was doing drugs in there, And in fact, even in the hole at EOCI, I was fucking shooting dope, And, nothing kept me from doing drugs. Nothing. I mean, because that was it. And it's like, it was my life, no matter what. I never imagined I never really thought of it myself, of like, hey, maybe I should stop doing drugs, It was like, fucking, how am I going to get some more? And a little bit was not enough. I always wanted more. And I could have a big bag right there, and I would still want more. Because, I think part of it was because then I was cool, people would like me, and I went through a long period of time when I was a child that people didn't like me. So I wanted that reinforcement of people liking me, or at least, and even the false, even though it was a false likeness, I still, at the time, I thought it was real. So of course I kept doing it, And then my drug use got really bad, and my violence escalated. And it got to a point where people didn't want me around, They didn't want me around to do collections for them even, It got so bad that one of my dealers would meet me at Walmart, and fucking, he would do the drug deal in the toy department at Walmart, and he would already have it stashed because, he didn't want me to fucking rob him because I'd already robbed him a couple of times, And it's like, that's pretty fucking bad, I mean, it's like, we're in the toy department, and I was like, come on, man, just, and he's like, hey, you put the money down, let me get it, and I'll tell you where it's at, that kind of shit. So that's the way I had to do my drug deals for a little bit. I didn't like to buy a whole lot of drugs, because what I found out was when I did that lengthy stay in prison was, I thought I found the solution, and the solution was you don't rob a business and pay for drugs. You just rob the drug dealer, right? And so that's what I started doing, you know. And I had a couple altercations with some groups of people. I don't like to call them gangs. I like to call them groups of people because I'd done work for them, and then knowing their drug houses and stuff like that, I ended up robbing a couple of the drug houses. And they caught me about 4 years ago, and I got my jaw broke, collarbone broke. They were actually, I truly believe they were going to kill me at the time. But one of the guys I used to work with, he let me go, you know. And they had me in a fucking dog crate for 3 days, naked, and they'd fucking piss on me. They'd fucking poke me with a broom, and you know, they were making sure that I understood that, you know, what I did was wrong. And but of course, in my mind was once I got away, was I'm going to hunt each one of these fuckers down because I was that sick, you know. And my mind was that nobody was going to do that to me, you know, even though I had initiated it. So anyway, I kind of I skipped a little part there. There's been a period of time from like the mid 90s all the way up until probably about 5 years ago that I was a functioning addict alcoholic. And I would do heroin a couple of times a week, and I would do meth a couple of times a week, but I drank, you know, excessively, you know. And in fact, a lot of the bars over in Kaiser, North Salem, a lot of the bartenders, bar owners, and patrons, they don't even know my fucking name. They know me as Patron or Joe Patron because, you know, I drank so much. And people, I would be nodding out, you know, at the bar, and somebody would say something, and I'd say, yeah, I just drank too much, you know. And then I'd go in the bathroom, do a little math, boom, just come back out and close the fucking bar down. And I always did everything in excessive amounts, man, fucking way excessive amounts. So when I don't really know what happened about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago. I really don't know what happened, but the bottom fell out of my world, and I just fucking, I just didn't give a fuck anymore, man. And so I was running wild, and you know, somebody like me wild out on the streets, not good, you know. So I ended up, I have a stepdaughter. I actually was doing drugs with her, and about 3 years ago, actually, she was telling me, she goes, Dad, you gotta quit doing heroin. You're being so violent. You know, you're just like way violent. You know, and so I was gonna kick heroin, and so I did so by shooting meth. You know, because that's how you kick heroin, right? And people thought I was violent on heroin. Fuck, I was off the charts on meth. You know, so I ended up robbing his drug dealer, and I got this big bag of meth from him. And inside the bag, there was a $40 paper of heroin. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody ever, in my entire life, I've never seen anything like that. So I just knew, because I promised my daughter I wouldn't do any more heroin. So I knew God was testing me, right? God said, I'm going to test you. This was my true, I really believed this at the time. So I promised my daughter I wouldn't, so I stashed that heroin. And then, you know, pretty soon that stuff ran out. Well, I ended up doing that, and my body wasn't used to doing that much, and I died. The only reason that I'm alive was that the EMT that showed up, she said, she goes, because I talked to her when I was in the hospital for a little bit. She came to see me. She goes, you know, your face looked familiar when I saw you, but she goes, a lot of people, look familiar. She goes, but when I opened up your eyes, she goes, I remember you were Joe Clontz. I used to date both of her sisters. They were twins, so it was kind of cool, you know. In high school, and she was she was like 5 or 6 years old at the time, and she goes, God, I fucking loved you and your blue eyes, man. She goes, so when she saw me and she opened up my eyes, she just knew it was Joe Clontz, you know, boom. And so she made sure that I didn't die. And in fact, she got written up by Falk Medical Services because, she went above and beyond what she was supposed to do. Because they usually hit you twice with Narcan and that's it. But, that I'm alive because of that. And so I was in the hospital for a little bit and decided to leave because they weren't, doing what I wanted them to do. And I was out on the street for a little bit, and then, it came, I was broke down, I was tired of being alone, and I wanted to do something, and a friend of mine in Arizona had called Bridgeway Services, and she told me, she goes, if you go there, what I recall is that if I go there, they would have a bed for me. So when I showed up over there, they said, no, you got to do a phone interview. And so I went and I called them, and they said, okay, you can come in. So I came in, and I remember Marcus and some other dude, I can't remember who it was. They were going through my bags, because they were going to see, they were trying to check me in to see if they had a bed available. And they found a bunch of dope in my bags, man. I was like, fuck, like rigs and bags of dope and shit. I was like, fuck, if I would have known I had that, I wouldn't be here, And fuck, I'm coming here because I ran out of shit, and I couldn't get no more. So, and I go, well, before you throw that away, make sure you got a bed, because if you don't have a bed, then I want my shit back, And he goes, yeah, well, the cops would really like to know that. And I was like, that's cool. I don't need that shit, So they didn't have a bed available for me. They were going to have one the next day, but I was very, very bad off. And then so they sent me down to the hospital. And so I was down there at the hospital for a little bit. And I ended up leaving because they weren't doing, of course, what I wanted them to do, And so I walked back to Bridgeway, and I can't remember the young lady that worked there at nighttime. But I knocked on the door at like 12:15, 1 o'clock, something like that. And I said, hey, you guys got a bed for me? Because they said they would have a bed for me today. And she goes, well, you got to come back when they're open. And I go, that's not what they said. They said they'd have a bed for me today. It's after fucking midnight. And she goes, well, you got to wait till in the morning. And I go, those painted rocks? I don't know, for everybody who's been to Bridgeway, those painted rocks on there. I set my ass down. I says, look, man, I don't want to fucking die, man. I'm going to sit right here. And she's, this is like in October, I think it was. It's raining, cold and shit. And she's like going, fuck, man, this guy. She goes, why don't you go over here between the two buildings in a little cubby hole there and lay there. So I did. And she actually got me a blanket. And I went over there and I faded out, And then Patty woke me up and she goes, hey, get in here. So she checked me in. They got me a bed, and I was in detox. And let me tell you something. I know I'm still sick, but I was fucking one sick dude back then. I went through detox. I was really wanting to get in the inpatient program, and there was somebody that pulled some fucking strings that's in this room to get me into fucking the inpatient, and thank you. So I got into inpatient there at Bridgeway, and I was there for a little while, a few weeks anyway. And anyway, I don't want to go into it because, but there was some stuff that happened, right? But I do want to share that after I had like 3 or 4 days clean there, and I had some food in me and I got some sleep, I remember I called Jimmy into the office because, again, Bridgeway wasn't doing what I fucking needed them to do, right? So I got my finger in his face and I'm telling them what they need to do. You guys got to change these policies. You need to change this, change that. And I go, you need to be more professional. And then he gets that fucking smile he gets, I'm like, what are you fucking smiling about, And he goes, professional? He goes, dude, we're just addicts with a little bit more clean time. And the way he tells the story is I walked out of the room with my finger still in the air, fucking what? You guys are addicts too? And so anyway, I ended up leaving Bridgeway. And I thought, you know what, I could smoke meth, because I've never really smoked meth that much, so I'll just smoke it. And I was out there for a little bit, I think maybe, a week or two or something like that, And I just scored for my buddy, and he was driving. We were coming back over the Mission Street Bridge. And I took a hit, and I had his bag and a pipe in my hand, and for some reason, man, I just fucking threw it out the window. And fucking, you talk about somebody hitting the brakes, you know, when their bag of dope gets thrown out the window. They fucking stopped. He's like, what the fuck are you doing, dude, you know? And it was like, man, I'm done, you know? And he's like fucking screaming and yelling at me and all this shit. I just got out of the car, and I walked up 17th Street, and I went to the SOS Club. And it was probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I stayed there. And during that time until they opened up was a real pivotal time in my life because I was alone. You know, I didn't have a God. I didn't have anybody. I was contemplating a lot of different things. There was no way, because I'm such a chicken shit, there's no way I could take my own life, but I could do it like, hey, I contemplated, you know, death by cop, you know, maybe fucking do this or maybe do that, or, you know, rob the store or do something, come up, you know, or just, I mean, all kinds of things ran through my mind. For some reason, I didn't do any of that shit, because that's normally what I would have done is something fucking stupid. But for some reason, I didn't. And they opened the doors at 10 o'clock, and I remember going in there, and there's a few people that frequent the place quite often that were there. And they bought me coffee, and they got me a muffin, and I swept, and I mopped, and I did shit. And later that afternoon, they let me sleep in the back like they're not supposed to. And that night, I went to a meeting. And it was the first meeting that I actually went to, besides, you know, being a detox or, you know, the treatment place. It was the first meeting, and like during my time on trying to do parole and shit, I could never do parole. I could never do any of that shit, because it's like, fuck, I don't like somebody having control over me, so I just abscond every fucking time. They got tired of that, and they just fucking let me go after a couple of years. But this was the first time I actually went to a meeting on my own because I wanted to, and I wanted something fucking different, man. Because I was so fucking, man, the way I like to describe it, the best way to describe it was my soul was shaking on the inside. It was like a fucking rattle can. You know, that's where I was. I tried fucking every fucking kind of drug and every kind of amount. That never fucking solved it. I tried vagina. That didn't solve it. I tried money. That didn't solve it. You know, I tried being popular. Nothing would fill this fucking, you know, this fucking emptiness inside of me. It just wouldn't. And so I went to this meeting, and it was my first NA meeting where I was actually there to listen and fucking try to get some help. And the first dude that shared, and I can't remember who it was, but he shared about chapter 5 in the NA basic text and how to get clean and stay clean. And when he shared that, because I wasn't too appropriate about things, even while he was still talking, I stood up and said, my name is Joe, I'm a fucking addict, and I need to do this, and he's still trying to talk, you know, and I was like, fucking dude, this is more important, you know, and I said, I need to get a sponsor, I need to get a book, I want to start doing service work, I want to start working the steps, you know, I need to do this, and I need to do it fucking now. And I looked at Terry D, and I said, and I want you to be my sponsor. And so he took me out to the big room there, out there by the concessions and stuff. And he got me a book, and he was telling me, number one, he goes, when somebody's sharing, you got to show respect to them. And I was like, man, fuck that punk, you know. And so, you know, I did service work that night. I put away chairs. And he gave me something to read. He told me to read chapter 5 as my pre-step work, you know, so I got a sponsor. And so I started doing what it said to get clean and stay clean. And he goes, just don't fucking use and be here tomorrow. So for about 5 or 6 nights, something like that, I would walk Salem. And this is in the middle of December. Because that was December 14th of 2015 was my first meeting, and that was my first clean date. And so for about a week, I walked around Salem at nighttime, and cold and raining, and all I had on was some fucking sweats, something like this here, a t-shirt, a sweat, a windbreaker, and some tennis shoes, and that was it, man. That was it. And I'd walk Salem at nighttime, and then I'd be there at 10 o'clock in the morning ready to fucking do some more service work and ready to go to another meeting that night at 7:30. And I did that for about 5-6 days. And Terry goes, have you ever thought about reaching out and asking for help? And I was like, man, fucking nobody wants to help me, dude. You don't understand. Of course, because I'm unique, right? And he goes, well, we'll try. So I put it out on Facebook that I needed some help. And the lady that hired me in 1996 when I first got out of my extended stay at my vacation spot, she hired me, and she was here in Salem. She goes, where are you at? And I said, I'm here in Salem. So she came and got me. She picked me up, took me to the cigarette store, got a carton of smokes for me, took me to Walmart, bought me a couple of pairs of pants, a couple of shirts, some personal hygiene stuff. I went home and I went to their place, I showered, and ate, and I slept so fucking hard, it was unreal, man. And that's pretty much what I did for the next about a week and a half, is I slept and I ate and I went to meetings. Because my body, I've got pictures. I've got a picture of me. It's up on Facebook of me whenever I fucking, what I looked like, and I looked like fucking shit, man. I mean, I was done. I was this close to death. So I did that, and I did what it said in chapter 5 of the other program. So anyway, I was finding that like the first 6 months that I was clean, every time I'd try to share at every meeting, and fucking, I'd say shit like, I was in Taco Bell today and it fucking pissed me off and I wanted to break the fucker's neck, I wanted to use and fucking all this shit. And I wasn't sharing like they say to share your experience, strength, and hope. I was just sharing to share, And finally my sponsor directed me on how to share in a meeting, which I think is really important for sponsors to do, But I was working through the steps. I did my 4th step and I did my 5th step. And there was something amazing about it because we were out at Wheatland Ferry and I did my 5th step with Terry. And I shared my fucking life story with him, And 2 dudes that were in a fucking joint that were considered bad motherfuckers were fucking hugging each other and crying in a fucking truck at Wheatland Ferry. And I know people that are driving by were just fucking, I know what I would have thought, like fuck, were they breaking up or something, fucking, but I didn't give a fuck at the time. And something happened because from that point on, when I would share, I was told this like about 3 or 4 weeks later, Frank, a lot of you guys know Frank, said, he goes, dude, I like to hear you share now. He goes, it's not about violence. It's not everything is about violence and stuff like that, And I was working through some stuff, and I was working through some steps. And so I was staying clean from drugs, and I haven't put my hands on anybody, but I was still worshiping the vajayjay, right? And that's something that I had a hard time with, man, is women, I was trying to feel, like my sponsor said, I was trying to fill this God-shaped hole in my heart with something besides God, And I figured if just this one girl would like me, man, if I just have sex with her, everything would be great. And afterwards, it wasn't so great. I didn't want to fucking hear her talk, And it was like, I used to think that it was because of my ego that I didn't want to hear her talk. Really, the reason I didn't want to hear her talk is because I was ashamed of myself. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but I did it anyway, And so there's a whole eclectic number of fucking that shit going on. But so I was clean for almost 2 years, and last September I relapsed. I relapsed because last summer I quit doing what it says, and I quit. I didn't contact my sponsor as much. I quit doing the steps like I was doing. I wasn't, I'd read a little bit, went over, I wasn't that into it. I wasn't doing service work, and I wasn't going to as many meetings. And I quit doing those things that got me clean and kept me clean. So last September, 3 really big things happened to me. One of them was real personal with the relationship. One was I got a $17,800 garnishment. And I was like, our HR person called me in the office at my job, and she says, you got a almost an $18,000 garnishment. I was like, what the fuck from, She goes, it's from Clackamas County. And I was like, what? And it still didn't click. So I called Clackamas County, and when I was there, I ended up blowing up 5 toilets, right? Back then they had porcelain toilets in 1987. So I blew up 5 toilets. And they tried to get me on arson charges. They couldn't, so they brought me an in-house adjudicator. He didn't give a fuck about the 17 affidavits. He said, you're found guilty, $17,800 to pay for the new stainless steel toilets and all the smoke damage and everything else. And I was like, I'm not paying shit, So anyway, about 5 years ago, they contacted me, and somehow they got my number. And the lady from Clackamas County goes, hey, I'm here to collect, the $17,000. And it says, I'm not paying shit. And at the time, I had a warrant out for my arrest because in 2004, I got a Dewey. And for some reason, I couldn't find a drug program that would let me drink and do drugs for 90 days. It's like fucking stupid, And I had to do this 90-day program, but they wanted me to do it without drinking and drugs. I'm like, fuck, I didn't understand that. So I started like 3 different programs and couldn't finish shit, So I just said, fuck it, I absconded, and I fucking had a warrant off my arrest. So she goes, well, we're going to suspend your license. And I go, bitch, I'm on the run, okay? I don't give a fuck. So that night, again, God spoke to me, right? I watched MSNBC or something like that, and I saw How to Fake Your Death. And I was like, there we go, God's speaking to me. He wants me to fake my death, right? So I do all the necessary paperwork, and I do, I put some fucking work behind this shit. But I don't want to call her back the very next day and say, hey, so I wait, and it was about 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from Clackamas County at my sister's place. So I called up, and I pretended to be my brother. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know Joe Clance has passed away, from an OD and stuff like that. She goes, oh, really? I could hear her hesitation. Now I can recall the hesitation in her voice, and her like, really? She goes, why don't you send me proof? So I sent her proof, She's like, okay, I even called to make sure that she got it because, and you got that right? Okay, all right. If you need anything, I'm James Clance. Here's my phone number. I give my brother's phone number, filled my brother in, paid him with a little drugs, and boom, it was cool, right? So I figured, hey, it got wiped off the slate. So when I called Clackamas County this last September, and I was asking them about the $17,800, she goes, yeah. She goes, you owe $17,800 for blowing up 5 toilets in Clackamas in 1987. And I was like, oh. She goes, yeah, and I recall a few years ago that you tried to fake your death. And I go, well, that wasn't me. And she goes, yeah, see, you're trying to change your voice now. This bitch, what she did was she was so fucking cautious about everything that was happening that she put a fucking sticky note on her computer with my name and social security number and shit. So she would just fucking once in a while, she would fucking run my social security number. And fucking last September, it fucking hit, and she was like, man, we're getting it. So they take $1,300 a month out of my check. They take 1/3 of my salary. I'm glad they don't fuck with my commissions. So that was devastating. I had a bad thing happen with the relationship. And then I was diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer. And all these things happened. And I was just like, fuck, man, this is just like devastating. So I was at a meeting at the SOS Club. And I lived down by Mission and 17th. And I drove down 17th. And I used to pull into AMP in there on State to grab me a pack of smokes. For some reason, I made a left on State Street. Made a left. I'm going to go down to Abdul Mart or whatever it is, US Mart or whatever the fuck it's called. And for some reason I made a right. I pulled into Club Pitbull, right? I'm just going to buy me a fucking joint. I've never really smoked that much pot anyway. I just want to buy a joint just in case, So I buy some 8, 12, whatever fucking dollar joint. I wanted to buy the big one, and I bought that. I pulled into US Mart and grabbed me a pack of smokes. And I walked right by the counter and I go back and I grabbed me a couple of tall boys. And I came back to the counter and I bought 6 or 7 packs of smokes. And the only time that I'd ever buy multiple packs of smokes like that was when I was fucking getting high, because I didn't want to have to keep leaving the fucking house, right? And And I don't really remember making a conscious decision at that time that I was going to get high. But as soon as I made a right on 21st, because it's right there on the corner of 21st, I remembered about 2 weeks prior, I gave a newcomer a ride home. And he was bitching and complaining he had to go to stupid fucking meetings because he got caught selling heroin. He doesn't even do this shit. And so he was right there off between Trade and Ferry on 22nd. So I was pulled over there, got me $100 worth of shit, went home. And those beers and that joint sat on my nightstand for like about 4 or 5 days. I didn't even do those. I grabbed some needles from my roommates because, you know, the diabetic and shit. And so I relapsed. And I stayed relapsed till last February 20th. During that time, I went to meetings. I would go to meetings and people would ask me, you know, are you high? And it's like, yeah, I'm fucking high. And sometimes, you know, like people like Jimmy, he wouldn't even have to ask because, you know, there's certain people that, you know, you trust and that you just, you know, you're fucking open with all the time. I'm fucking high, dude, you know, and he was like, dude, man, you know, I can get you into Bridgeway, man, I'll help you, bro. You know, I was like, fuck that, man, you know, I don't want any of that shit, you know. But I kept coming to meetings, and I'd go to like a meeting or two, maybe 3 a week. And there was a time that John W. had to, I fucking was nodding out, and he fucking nudged me, brought me to, you know, woke me up, and so I didn't want to fucking, the meeting had just started, right? You know, it's like I wanted to stay for the meeting. So I go out in the parking lot of the SOS Club and I bang some fucking meth so I can make it through the meeting, right? And this is how sick I am, man, you know, because I'm a fucking dope fiend and nothing's going to keep me from it. You know, when I want to fucking use, I fucking use. And just like I was saying, you know, I did a 90-day stretch in a hole at EOCI, and the longest clean time I could keep in the hole was 19 days. You know, because I was getting high in the fucking hole. Fuck that shit. I like to get high, and I'm going to get high no matter what. So anyway, my sponsor was working with me, and he helped me clean up, and I did the marijuana and the beer maintenance program for about 2 weeks. And on the 19th of February, he said, tomorrow's going to be your clean date. And I was like, nah, I'm still a little sick, man. And he goes, fuck it, you're not a pussy. All right? So February 20th, I got clean. And I've been clean since, and that's why just last Sunday I celebrated 6 months. Through all of that, what I've learned to do is I've learned to actually have relationships with people. Not so much the opposite sex still, because I'm still fucked up in that area. Huh? Right? But you know, I actually have good friends, and I have really good friends, people that care about me, that love me, and I'd never had that before, you know. People that call me, say, hey, what's going on? And maybe they don't say that. Maybe they say, what's up, nigga, and shit like that. But, you know, same shit, right? But, you know, they care about me, and they'll help me. And I've learned to love other people, you know. That was something I'm very, and I'm still that way. I'm still very self-centered, but I'm working on that, you know. I'm not, you know, I've got a lot of shit that I got to work on. But I'm grateful that I'm alive, man, and I'm grateful that I'm not fucking incarcerated. I've done 13 and a half years locked up, almost 13 and a half years locked up, and I don't like prison, man. I don't fucking like it at all. I don't like being told what to do, so it's really hard for me in prison. I do a lot of whole time, you know, because I don't like being told what to do. And I love the fact that people care about me, man, and they fucking honestly love me and they care about me, you know, and I've learned to love people. But I think the biggest thing for me about being clean and working a program is my relationship with my higher power. Because I'd never had that before. Because my friends aren't always there. But my higher power is, you know. And I remember at one point in time, my sponsor said, you know, in the other program, we would circle and we would say the third step prayer. And I would always look up, and he asked me, he goes, why do you always look up when we pray? I says, I'm looking God in the eye. And he goes, so you fucking think you're equal to God? And I was like, well, he's no fucking better than I am. And he's like, dude, we got to work on this shit. Because, I believed in God, but it was like, dude, you haven't really done a whole lot for me. I wasn't grateful for what he'd done in my life. Because he'd done a lot of stuff in my life. And that's who my higher power is God. He'd done a lot of stuff in my life. And I wasn't grateful for it. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't humble myself before my higher power. So my sponsor said, he goes, what I want you to do is, he goes, I want you to try this tonight. He goes, I want you to get on your knees and pray every night and every morning. And the first time I got on my knees to pray, I had to fucking look, and I had a room all to myself, right? But I was looking around, make sure no motherfucking buddy was watching me, like in the window or something like that. Because I didn't want that, my ego was getting the best of me. And I got on my knees and I prayed, and I was like, fucking nothing happened, So that morning, the next morning I did that. But after about the third or fourth day, something was happening, man. And I was starting to pray a lot more. And I was starting to communicate, and I was starting to have a relationship with my higher power. And I think for me that's the biggest and the most important thing about me working at steps in the program is that because my higher power helps direct me. If I have an issue, a question about whether something's right or wrong, if I pray about it and I stop, and that's that meditation, and I can hear the answer, the fucking answer is pretty simple, right or wrong. You know what I mean? Right or wrong. But if I stop my brain from thinking, because my brain, I play that as another guy in the program would say, K-fuck radio, I can convince myself of anything, right? So my higher power is, like I say, is probably the most important thing for me. I'm grateful for that. I just wanted to share that some people that know me know that I buy coffee cards at the clubs, and I'll buy people coffee, and I'll give coffee cards out and stuff. One of the reasons I do that was because that's what was done for me. People bought me coffee, and people bought me a muffin and stuff like that. So I try to give back, and I'll buy a book once in a while for somebody. I'll buy a membership to the club sometimes for somebody, and I'm not looking for to be acknowledged for that. I'm just saying that that's the way I do my service work. We all do stuff differently, but that's what I do. I try to help out the newcomer, because the newcomer is the most important person in any meeting. And the reason I like to do the coffee card thing is because if I give them a coffee card, they know they can come back there to a clean and sober place and have a cup of coffee, and that fucking keeps bringing them back, And very rarely have I seen somebody I give a coffee card to and then I never see them again. They usually don't, unless they get locked up, But sometimes, in this, it happens. So anyway, I'm really grateful. I can't say it enough, to be alive, to not be locked up, and to be loved and be able to have that ability to love, and to have my higher power. So it's pretty much all I got.